Good morning. So today we're going to continue IO psychology. So today's class is going to feed into next class with the archetypes. But what I really want to sort of do today is use my model, the mother, father, child triad, the buckets, all of the concepts that obviously you guys are familiar with, and bring it now into the workplace. So what we've covered all month is the idea that work is sacred space, the idea that work is not only material, but it's spiritual, that these two sort of consciousness levels are dual consciousness of spirit and matter, rational and intuitive, come together so that we can be whole. I'm going to talk about that, the individuation, Jung, but I'm going to now start tying in the origin story, the buckets, the family, the parenting style, your inner child, so that you could see how there's a parallel between your childhood and where you work and why you choose, quote unquote, as per the spiritual law, to choose where you work. Not to mean that you can't leave your work. It's just like when we leave a partner and I say to you, well, if you haven't done the work and you haven't raised your consciousness, you're basically just going to find another person with a different face, having the same value system or the same consciousness level, because you still have that work to do. The same theories, the same spiritual laws are woven through the workplace. So because the workplace is, according to sort of the Saturn cycles or the Saturn archetype, about 30 years, we're there day in and day out. So now I'm going to tie in your family life, what happened as a child, and link it to the characters, the snow globe, the origin story of your work. And this is what I would do with clients as well. After sort of understanding their thread, their themes, their myth, their childhood story, if they come for work-related stresses or illnesses or the things that we've talked about all month, I would obviously use the model in this way to ask similar questions. So that's the goal for today. So there's two laws that I want to focus on. So all month we've been looking at law of correspondence. And law of correspondence, as I've said, is how I live my life. And I really try, after that initial impure thought, to be very present. And whatever I've invited into my sphere of consciousness to utilize so that I can get a message and do whatever work needs to be done at both the material and the spiritual level. So for instance, I was in the bathroom the other day and I heard the two OTA ladies talking, and one kept correcting the other one about fascia, how to say the word. And I was in the bathroom for like 30 seconds washing my hands, and I heard the word fascia literally 5 or 10 times. And I said, okay, that is not entering my sphere of consciousness so that I don't have to look at it. So that's how I really use this law. When I tell you I use it all day, every day, I may not get it immediately what it's about. And I have this technique I use with clients that I Mr. Potato Head it. When things enter my sphere of consciousness using the law of correspondence, I kind of make like an equation. And then at the end of the equation, I see sort of what this is teaching me or guiding me to look at. So fascia for this week is sort of on my list of terms. And mitochondria came up and bone health came up. And all these words that I know symbolically, because I listen archetypally and symbolically, I use to kind of thread together. And you might see that in a lecture. That might be something I'm working on in my own life, or it shows up with a client. So I never miss any opportunity. And work, because we're there, 8 hours a day, is really that opportunity. The other law is the law of cause and effect. So that's the Hermetic philosophy. Most of you know it as the law of karma. So karma is actually a Sanskrit word that means action. But the law in the Hermetic philosophy is law of cause and effect. And what it says is every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to the law. Chance is but a name, not for the law, not recognized, but nothing escapes the law. So when we say chance, it happened by chance, it's just because you don't know the law. But everything falls in the law. Everything is sort of this relationship of cause and effect. So the point of today is to explain you're not at your job accidentally. You may not be aware of why, and that's part of what I want to talk about, but it's directly related to your childhood experiences that you're still working through as a wound or trying to adult. And that's part of what this law of correspondence is. Law versus chance. If something acted outside of the law, it would be superior to it. And I told you that the main laws of the principle of mentalism, everything falls into this energetic field, this consciousness that we're trying to raise, which is basically the purpose of life at the spiritual and the material, what Jung calls individuation, what in spirit we call consciousness. Chance is obscure. We cannot perceive it. That's why oftentimes we say chance, just because we don't know. We don't have access, like I've said, to these higher planes of the universe, so we may not have language for it, but it all falls in the law. Nothing creates another thing. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It is an event that arises out of a preceding event. So going back to sort of the accident of being at your job, it's not accidental. It's directly related to those childhood years, to the crack in the snow globe, to the unmet need, to the parenting and attachment styles, all of which I'm going to talk to today, that led you to that job. I'm going to share a story of how I came back to Kaiser, because I've been at Kaiser 15 times in my lifetime. And this particular origin story that appears to be chance, but it's not. So in the Vedas or the Hindu philosophy, it's called karma, the law of karma. And I said, karma simply means action. And one of the things that we do at work is obviously have measurable action, right? We get a paycheck, we spend time, we utilize our energy, our resources, and hopefully we grow in terms of our individuation and to heal a lot of the stuff from childhood, because we will meet those same characters, which we'll refer to as archetypes later on. There's 3 types of karma. Sanchita karma, I've mentioned before, when you are born, when you're conceived, when I did the whole lecture on the 3 fates, and I said Clotho is at the moment of conception, and she's sort of weaving the fate of your life. She's there to design what thread or what one little thread of karma in this lifetime you're going to live out. And no more, no less. You have one. When I tell you literally one issue, it's woven through your work, your relationships, your health issues. It's woven through everything. So then Sanchita karma is all the karma of all your lifetimes. Your Prabha karma is the one thread that you're working on in this lifetime. And then your Agami karma is any karma you add to throughout this life. The hope is to not add any more, and that we can actually purify and work through the Prabha karma of the lifetime. So a few mythology this class. Themis, I've mentioned her before. Here she is. She's actually the goddess of justice, of karma, of foresight, of truth, of morality, of equity. Karma is sort of dispatched, if you will, equally. We may not see it equally, depending on our circumstances in life, but the law states that you get this Prabha karma rooted on your previous deeds, and we don't have knowledge of the laws of the universe, and we kind of take this to be true, that we're all sort of given what we're supposed to be working on in this lifetime. And so things are indeed scaled and balanced. So when you think that something's out of balance, or you think that something's unjust, the law dictates otherwise, and the myth. Adrestia is the goddess, she who cannot be escaped. And we've talked about this entire month, the archetype of Saturn. So when I talked about the Senex, when I talked about death, when I talk about karma, when I talk about work, whether you have a job or not, every day, waking up, the Groundhog Day, having to do sort of the purification of your life, of your soul, and time, of course, there's limited time. She is the daughter of Aries and Aphrodite, the balance of the masculine and the feminine. Again, there is a belief that work, it is a belief that this karma, it is a belief that this day in and day out process is directly linked to you becoming whole and individuated and unified in your masculine and feminine energies, which we talk about is the sixth chakra, which is the throne, so you could dethrone your parents and become the ruler of your own life and be the leader of your own life and the king of your own life in the metaphors I've used throughout class. So there are a few other myths that have to do with work and vocation in nature. The first one is of Lug. So this is Lug here, and Lug goes to the kingdom to go get a job. And the gentleman at the door opens the door and says, well, what are you here for? And he's like, well, I want to talk to the king. I want a job. And he's like, well, what do you do? And he's like, well, I'm a craftsman. He's like, oh, we already have that. He's like, I'm a wine bearer, cup bearer. Oh, we already have 9 of those. Well, I'm a warrior. He's like, oh, we have that already. And he kept spewing off all these skills that he had. He was a pianist, and they're like, no, we have that. And what Lug says to the guy at the door is, I want to speak to the chief. I want to speak to the king. Because if I am one man who has all these skills, why wouldn't you want me? In a modern day and age, if you can have one employee that has all these skill sets, it doesn't mean that you're going to get rid of 9 or 10 other employees, but you're going to utilize that employee. So there's a few lessons here in terms of work, especially, and some of you are very young. It's about acquisition of skill and knowledge. Eventually, as we get older, it's the wisdom and learning, and I'm going to talk about that in the next myth, from other people, and obviously you becoming wiser. But part of the process of work, part of the fine-tuning and the growth in the work environment is to acquire skill. So I had a client the other day, and he's a Capricorn, a lot of planets in Capricorn, and Capricorn is the sign of sort of like very much an ambitious person and somewhat of like the king. He rules the Saturn archetype. But all of his planets were in the 6th house, which is like the donkey, the day-to-day, the tending to the land. And I said to him, I'm like, even though you have all of this Capricornian, ambitious sort of, desire, the fact that all of that stuff is in the 6th house of the day-to-day means you have to build, you have to serve, you have to acquire. And he was a young kid. I said, you just don't get to the top. It's like Lug, like he acquired these skills. Then when he went to sell himself, his verbal resume, the king was like, oh, absolutely, I want you on my team. He realized that he could substitute maybe 2 or 3 other people for one, which is obviously something that's valid in this day and age, but just the self-worth piece, knowing what he was worth. And we've been in a society where we're not allowed to sort of own our gifts. We're not allowed to say, I'm brilliant, or I have this really strong skill set. And that is not correct. We have to be the #1 marketer and self-promoter for ourselves. So this is a Celtic myth. He indeed obviously gets the job. Some of the qualities of Lug, he was very mercurial. He knew how to speak. He knew how to communicate. He knew how to connect the dots. This is very important in terms of your work environment and for you to do sort of your inner work. He was very persistent. He didn't give up. He kept saying, I do this, I do this, I do this. Persistence is the consistency, is the day-to-day. We have to just sort of stick with it. We can't, like I said last week, just job hop, be serial job hoppers. We're not going to maybe be at a job 30, 40 years like we used to be, but there's a reason we're at a job, and we should try to extract the essence of why we ended up there, because as we see, it's not chance. Knowledge of self. Really knowing what you're good at and really owning that. He was very good at that. And yet he had practical experience, and we need practical experience. Education, unfortunately, is not enough. That's why pre-COVID, we would do the role plays and the counseling hours, because it's important to have the practical experience. And in your grad work, you will have more of that. There's a West African myth of 2 brothers. One is Maikuneri and one is Kanyanga. Maikuneri was older, and he was a little snobby. There was this old woman who came up to him in the village and says, I can help you. And he's like, you can't help me. Like, you're old and blind, and what do you want? And she's like, please rub my eyes. But they were kind of crusty and dirty, and he was a little disgusted. He's like, no, I'm not touching you. And there was a little town down the road of these little men. They weren't children, they were men. They were just sort of small men. And she had the secrets at how to get those men to help, which was the goal of what my Kunari wanted to do, to sort of win the kingdom. But since he didn't ask for help and he assumed that he knew everything, he failed at the task. Now, his younger brother, on the other hand, did help the woman, did remove the crust from her eyes. She was then able to give him some sight, told him how to deal with the small men on the island, and he was able to sort of win the prize. Everybody at your office, and we'll see later on in life, law of correspondence, but specifically in work, we're going to see the Sherpa. We're going to see an archetype that's like what you might think is the janitor or the customer service or the nobody is there also as a resource. And that's part of what your archetypes in your mind. So don't discard anything or anyone, because you don't know who has the wisdom that you may not have, and always have your ears up to listen. So he used everyone as a resource. He stayed humble, which is part of the flexibility that we learn at work, the different power currency, and he actually won at the task. I think I told you about Phaeton before, where he was given the chariot to carry the sun across the sky and he crashed and burned. He was too furious, too fast, too young. A lot of times we don't know how to use our fire and we burn through things. I remember in high school, I was editor of my yearbook and my mentor left and I was very, very sad. And they hired this woman named Bonnie, and she was young and beautiful, and I was very insecure, and I had been sort of like the queen of the yearbook, and she comes and she knocked me down. Like, I didn't have an ounce of humility. I did not care that she was older, even though she looked young and stuff. I went head to head with her and I lost. And there's a John Cougar Mellencamp song, I think it's called Authority. And he's like, I fight authority, authority always wins. There are people like me that struggle with pride that need reminders to stay humble, especially when I was, 16 or 17 years old. I definitely have learned that lesson. However, there are times that you have to sort of exercise that power and that overcurrency, but it's about learning how. And with age and wisdom, you learn that over time. And Arachne, so here's Arachne. Arachne was a weaver in Greek mythology, and they did a contest to weave for Athena back here. And Arachne won, and she said that she was a better weaver than Athena. Well, you don't say that. And she didn't know when to keep her mouth shut, and she was very prideful and very greedy. And what happened was Athena turned her into a spider. And it's this idea of, it's not necessarily respect your elders, it's just know your place. There's times where you actually do exercise your authority, your knowledge of self, like with Lug, but there are other times that you have to be humble, and that's part of the process. We don't get to do that in our family of origin. Our subconscious is forming from 0 to 7. Basically, the parents are the parents. We meet their needs. They tell us our drama, our trauma, and that's it. We take it at face value. It's during these years of work that we actually get to work through these. That's why the 6th house is the day-to-day, is like tending the land, which is our body, our illness, our health, our happiness, our contentment, our joy. All of this happens in the workplace, but we have to bring those sort of characters from youth to work so we can see the parallels. So just some things on philosophy. I'm not going to talk too much. There's a philosophical term called causality, again, that link to cause and effect. There's process philosophy that says that every cause and every effect are actually linked in a process. So this goes back to the Hermetic law. Aristotle said that there were 4 types of answers to answer a why question. And that's a lot of what we do, is ask questions to clients. So we want to absolutely understand the sort of questions and how to ask proper questions. And a lot of it is to make that relationship of the cause and effect for the client. So Your workplace resembles your family home and your childhood. At work, you have an origin story. Did you respond to an ad? Did a friend tell you about it? What happened at the interview? How was the offer conceived? So this time around at Kaiser, I had been an adjunct just a few months earlier at another campus in the psych department. And one of the deans at this campus called that dean and said, hey, do you know anybody who would be good for this job? And he calls me. Well, it was on my birthday. And that's a very important symbolic thing. It was on my birthday. It's sort of like a new solar return, a new calendar year, a rebirth. So there's a thread there that I get to follow in this origin story. So find out or write down for yourself, for your clients, how did they find out about the ad? How did the interview go? One of the things that came up in my interview was the fact that every Tuesday night I have family dinner with my father mainly, and when my kids are in town with my kids. So it became sort of a thread in the conversation, family. So that's another thread to weave. So I'm here to obviously work through some family stuff. Here's my birth story. Like there's too much coincidence, so to speak, that doesn't exist in law to not look at those symbols. So when you ask a client or you look at yourself, how did this job get conceived? You can get a lot of symbolism and information from that. Your job has good buckets and your job has bad buckets. Sit down and write that. It's not only going to link back to work you have to do inner, but again, mother, father is every person, place, thing, or situation. So you can start doing some shadow work with the bad buckets of the qualities that you deem that you don't like about your job. What's the child script? Remember, there's two parts to the child script. What would you describe yourself as in that role in the family from 0 to 7? So that could be, why were you hired, or what's your version of why you were hired? And the other is the prophecy, what other people say about you as a child. What do other people say about you at work? What have you heard through the halls? What are people's sort of key words to describe you? Because in that question to a client, how others would say you show up at work will directly relate to how you fulfill the role. So there's an ongoing joke, because I text all of you guys and I have you on the group chat, that I'm like the texter. I'm known as the faculty that texts the students. Every time a new student starts, I give them my number, I text them. So obviously communication is a big thread for me, being in contact, being available. These are sort of the prophecies on campus about me. So you want to know what's sort of being said so you can identify what role you're trying to fulfill, and link it back, of course, to your role in your family. And I was definitely the mediator in my family. What was the snow globe crack at work? You can call that your first fight, your first disillusionment. Maybe it was the minute you saw your first paycheck. I mean, what was that snow globe crack? There was something that at that moment, the fantasy of the snow globe, of this new job, of this great location, of this great paycheck, of this great job title was shattered. And then we're going to talk more about it, but what's the parenting style at work? And that's something that we definitely want to look at, because that's going to be directly linked to your childhood home and your script. So there are 4 main parenting styles in childhood homes that carry over to the workplace. The first is the authoritative, which is the tender teacher, this picture here. And the way I remember it is TT is tender teacher. This is a parent that gives you rules and consequences, but they care about your opinion. They validate your feelings. They don't say, no, that's not really what happened, or that's not what you feel. They don't invalidate you. Research shows that these children are happier, they're more capable, they're more successful, and they're more self-disciplined. I'm going to tie this in a moment directly to the work environment. This work environment is more of a trust work environment, is more of an environment where your boss will obviously give you consequences or give you reviews, but allows you to speak up freely in the work environment without fear. An authoritarian is a rigid ruler. You see her here scolding the child. They impose authority without exception. It leads to children who are obedient and proficient. the research shows these children have less happiness, social confidence, and self-esteem. These are not the lugs of the world. These are not the people that are going to show up and say, I should get a raise because I do this, this, and this, or these are my competencies. These people tend to end up in more fear-based work environments. Then there's permissive parents that basically let you do most anything. They're quite lenient. They might interject if there's a severe issue, you got kicked out of school or some major drama, you went to jail for shoplifting. And it's usually that attention-seeking behavior that these children act out because they want to have the attention of the parents. But the parent doesn't even really discourage bad choices or bad behavior. This could be someone who has their own business, who doesn't really like to have an environment where they're not the boss. That doesn't mean that it's everybody, but that's just one manifestation. And then there's uninvolved parents, children that raise themselves and basically have no parental figure whatsoever. So I'm going to focus mainly on the authoritative and the authoritarian style and how that can show up in the work environment. So I say that the most expensive real estate is the real estate in my head. If something takes up a thought in my head, it better be something that I'm going to learn from. If I can't let go of something, if I can't just put it through my spiritual TED Talk, if I can't put it through my model and identify the unmet need and go there and define what this is, I work through that because it is taking up space. And that has happened to me in work environments, and that's sort of how I developed this theory. What thoughts about work take up space in your head? Is it the paycheck? Is it the schedule? Is it you're going to get in trouble? Later, we're going to talk about perfectionism. These are things directly related to your childhood traumas, your unmet needs, your wounds of feeling inadequate, abandoned, not enough. So I've talked to you before about the competitive voices. When we did the Dethroning Olympus, I told you that you have competitive voices and collaborative voices. The competitive voices are those archetypes that show up in your life, in your head. I tell you, you're not enough. I call mine the perfect older sister. Perfectionism is linked to this, and I'm going to talk about that more in a moment. At work, your parents show up. They show up with the parenting style of the institution or your leader or your boss or your direct supervisor or your manager. That parenting style shows up because it is there for you to work through, for you to become start from a child and purify and sort of grow in wisdom as an adult. And we'll talk about psychological safety in a moment, but is your head psychologically safe or is it dangerous? Is it safe to be in those thoughts? Are you processing those thoughts and seeing that this can contribute to your mental health, your spiritual well-being? Or are these really damaging, self-inflicting, damaging thoughts that you're working with? And we're going to talk about Mokitas. Mokitas is a term from Papua New Guinea that speaks to the elephant in the room that many people won't address at work because they have an authoritative or authoritarian work environment. So in leadership or in workplace, there's known as fear-based cultures in the workplace. These are absolutely competitive voices in the head where there's a lot of tension, perhaps there's a lot of authority, there's a lot of rules, rigidity, everything is very punitive. So a fear-based culture, again, this is all happening in your head and manifesting in your workplace, specializes in assigning work, measuring results, punishing infractions, and maintaining order. There is some gatekeeper at the door. They're watching the clock. You've got to punch in. You've got to meet your minutes. There really isn't much emphasis perhaps on even quality. It might be more of a quantity place. It's all about the metrics and not even like in using the metrics to grow. It's just about sort of checking lists and so forth. People that live in this sort of fear-based culture or have this going on in their head is psychologically dangerous. They have a constant fear of losing their job. They're afraid to tell the truth. They question all the time. That's sort of one of the penetrating thoughts. Will I have a job? They live with fear and suspicion about who's saying what, who's doing who, are there spies, things like that. There's resentment that develops as a result. This is directly linked to a lack of safety and security needs from childhood, and this is directly linked to authoritarian parents, which I told you is more sort of fear and punishment and obedience and compliance. It's really not about validating feelings. So if you're in a fear-based culture and you've created this according to the law of correspondence to work through these voices in your head, these archetypes from childhood, these are sort of the themes that you'll work on in yourself or with your clients. So Daniel Pink wrote a book called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And in his book, he talks about the 7 deadly flaws, and this is directly related to a work experience, that this can extinguish motivation when we don't feel safe in a workplace, so a fear-based culture. It diminishes performance. It crushes creativity. It crowds out good behavior because there's so much focus on the punitive and the bad. It encourages shortcuts, cheating, and unethical behavior. People are kind of seeing how to break the rules. And if we link this to childhood, people that have such oppressive or fear-based childhood or authoritarian parents, they're always looking to see, how can I sneak out? How can I, get away with something? It almost becomes sort of a shadow aspect to your psyche because you need to sort of release the oppressor. You need freedom from these oppressing thoughts and this oppressing parenting style. No different at work. He says that it can become addictive. This is directly linked to what I call the psychological homeostasis. When you've got that unmet need, when you prove yourself repeatedly that you're not enough, or you're abandoned, you're low self-worth, or no one loves you. And so this exact environment that you would think you would want to get out of actually feeds your unmet needs, feeds the childhood trauma, feeds that vicious cycle of child thinking and child behavior, and is actually quite addictive, he says. And it fosters short-term thinking. So you're not ever thinking long-term goals, wisdom, 5-10-year plans. You're just kind of in the moment. It's that emotional hunger I tell you about, that you're just trying to get your need met. And so it's a vicious cycle that perpetuates. And he calls this psychological danger. Starts with fear of admitting mistakes, blaming others. You don't share different viewpoints, so it becomes a homogenous culture because no one wants to share an opinion or an idea. And it becomes what's known as the common knowledge effect. It's sort of just, the status quo, if you will, in the office, and nothing is ever challenged or tried to do differently. The collaborative voice, those aspects of your head that get along, this type of culture of work environment is rooted in psychological safety and is a trust-based culture. Harvard professor Amy Edmondson coined the term psychological safety for the workplace. You're not humiliated or punished if you come up with an idea, if you talk about a concern, or if you address mistakes of yourself or colleagues or even leaders. So we'll talk about Mokitas in a moment. This leads to more innovation, increased productivity, authentic environment of candor, and is directly linked to authoritative parenting, where your feelings, your needs, maybe not needs fully met since no child's needs are met, but there might be a validation factor here, or there just might be validation of your emotions that are at least acknowledged. People in this sort of work environment are comfortable admitting their mistakes. They openly will say, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, or let me try to fix that. They learn from their failures. Everyone openly shares their ideas, and no one's ridiculed or criticized. And it creates for a more innovative workplace and better decision-making because everyone's involved in the decision-making process. So Pink in his book says that there are 3 levels of motivation linked to these work environments, the trust or the fear-based cultures. Motivation 1.0 is a basic survival. That's why I said it's linked to safety and security needs. You are fear all the time. You're in a fight or flight, an adrenaline rush, in a constant sort of, trying to not get fired, just surviving. And there are childhood homes that resemble that same thing. Motivation 2.0 is when you seek reward and avoid punishment. This is also very childish because I've talked to you about Kohlberg's morality. And good boy morality is simply so it appears that you're doing good. This creates karma. This is part of that agami karma. As I said, we don't want to keep creating. We will create additional karma if we show up just acting good girl, good boy. It's linked to the spiritual STD. If you're not saying, thinking, and doing the same thing, you're creating karma, even though on paper it looks like you did the right thing. This morning I heard a story of somebody at their job that they went and painted the wall without any permission. And the person who was in charge of doing that project was like, I now have to undo what you've done. And it appears as if the intention was altruistically motivated, although we know it's not. It's back to this, the reward and the punishment. So this person, without knowing it subconsciously, was either wanting to seek a reward or indeed seek a punishment to repeat that sort of childhood pattern. And then Pink says that motivation 3.0, linked much more to trust-based cultures and authoritative parenting, is to seek autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So this is sort of the lug where you can show up, you can be autonomous, maybe you're in control of your own schedule. That's what a lot of COVID did. And COVID sort of, opened up that people go to Publix on Wednesday morning or make a doctor's appointment, then work a little later. This is where the movement, so to speak, that COVID opened up in the workplace is headed. Not all companies are doing this, but this is what we're seeing a lot in the literature around workplace management now. Mastery, self-mastery. Again, it's not only the skill and the knowledge that you do need to build so that you have that wisdom and become, the Senex of your work, but also self-mastery, using the workplace to learn about mistakes. And you'll see in a moment something that Facebook did. And of course, purpose. We've talked about the link to individuation, identifying your purpose, your work that leads to your vocation. So there's a term called Mokitas. Mokitas is a Papua New Guinea term, and it means everybody knows, but no one talks about. We've all been there. It's the elephant in the room. There's one in every family. It's like hush, hush, whispered. No one says it, but it's sort of like energetically just looms in the room. And more of the fear-based cultures have this idea. And so some companies have actually gone a step further to say, what is your Mokita? What is it that internally you carry? This is a project or an assignment you can give your employees, you can give your clients, is what is the personal sort of Mokita and what's going on in the workplace. If you don't want to have it, if you want to have it anonymous, that's fine, but it's something that maybe can air the dirty laundry to get clarity in the workplace. This is going to be more with trust cultures than fear-based cultures that would invite a project like that. Research shows the fewer Mokitas, the healthier the business. And this is directly linked to our spiritual striptease. The less masks, and you'll see I have the 5 diamond qualities in a moment, the less masks you wear, the less Mokitas, the healthier you are. So I meant Google, not Facebook, I'm sorry. Google in 2012 launched an initiative called Project Aristotle. And they wanted to know what made a healthy workplace, to use the term psychological safety. They wanted to know what qualities created a psychologically safe workplace. They learned that no one wants to put on a work face, that you don't have to go to work and put on a face that nothing's wrong, that everything's okay. I told you guys about my own depression, how I showed up to work, who liked it, who didn't. I needed to heal. And that's just the way it was. And some people appreciated it and others shunned it. And basically I had to do what I had to do, but it was uncomfortable. And most people, I actually gave a lecture in the workplace a few months ago, and there was a lot of talk about gratitude and positive vibes and happiness and putting on smiles. And I called BS on that. it's like, yeah, obviously there's a place for gratitude, and obviously there's a place for optimism and positivity. But what about talking about the Mokitas, the elephant in the room? I was just invited to participate on a project with children so that they can learn more empathy and gratitude and compassion. And I said, nope, we need to start at the unmet needs. We're not going to continue teaching generation after generation, put on a smiley face, put on a work face, put on the face that everything's great when you're in pain. That's not okay. They also learned that no one wants to leave a part of their personality and inner life at home. They obviously understood that work is the sacred space where you spend time with people the most. All archetypes are there. All family members are there. All aspects of your psyche are there. Why would you want to leave your inner life at home when one of the key components of work is to work through, sort of cultivate your inner life? The other thing that they said were that they learned that you're able to talk about what is messy or sad and have hard conversations, even about your own colleagues, telling your colleague that he or she is lazy or that they didn't do a good job, being comfortable in the discomfort. I once asked a client, would you rather be uncomfortably uncomfortable or comfortably numb? Like, we're so used to just being numb and be, robotic, that we won't have these things. We won't, let anybody be uncomfortable or have any grief or sadness. That's one of the whole theories that I have about illness. Illness is only one of these ways that we have permission to be sad and grieving and not okay. We can actually reduce that if we create environments that are safe for people to have messy, hard conversations. And they learned something called C equals R equals C. Conversation is the relationship, is the culture. So the conversations that you're having are building the relationships in the workforce, and that indeed builds the culture. And what they wanted to is build a psychologically safe culture. And nobody comes from that in home. Nobody. We do not have safety needs and securities met at childhood. Unfortunately, this is the adult archetype. This is the Saturn archetype. This is the space exactly where we're supposed to cultivate these sort of adulting and spiritual adulting demands. And it really is the equation. C equals R equals C. So I want to talk about a topic that's very dear to my heart, which is coercion. So I think most of you know that I was born into a cult. I left the cult around 33. I met another man who was another spiritual teacher, and I left that relationship. And I found myself in a point in my life where I was having a major existential crisis, that I didn't know what I believed in. I didn't have an identity, much less a spiritual identity, which is my entire identity. So I was in my house and I was like crying. And I just screamed out to the universe. And I said, if there is something, please show me. And this book called The Zohar fell off the shelf. And this quote opened up and it said, there is no coercion in spirituality. And I realized at that moment that I had never really known true spirituality, because every single supposed teacher that I had been coercive. And it really gave me the vision of my life and put me on my journey of seeking and to become who I am today. But unfortunately, not everyone grows up in a cult, but everyone grows up in a coercive family. That's just the reality of it. If your needs are not met and you need to get good grades or look a certain way, or children should be seen, not heard, or whatever the unspoken or spoken language is at home, that's coercion. So there is coercion in families, and there's actually research on parent-child coercive cycles. These same cycles, and however you lived it in your childhood, not getting your needs met, having to cook, clean, and counsel your mother, whatever it was, take out the trash, and you got yelled at if you didn't do it right, whatever it was. I don't know your particular story. There is a link to coerciveness there. That will show up in your work environment. It's probably one of the relationships or the archetypes that you struggle with, because it's something that you have to look at deeper. In definition of spiritual abuse is defined as coercion or control of one individual by another in a spiritual context. Well, it's no different in a parental unit. It's no different in a work unit. It's literally coercive and it's abuse. And if all things are material and spiritual, everybody has had some version of this. Manipulation is key. Gaslighting is key. Some sort of violence, whether it's workplace violence or domestic violence or family violence, and it could be just emotional. This does not have to be physical. If your needs are not met, there is a link to coercion and you having to be a certain something, which will lead to perfectionism in a moment, in order to get some conditional Costco version of love that your parents were offering you. This is coercive in nature. There's a scale of 1 to 10. Somewhere on there, there's something in your psyche, and that has to show up in your workplace. You might get shunned at work by a certain group of people. There might be guilt trips if you don't, go to the meetings or the softball club at work. This is the polar opposite to freedom. Coercion is the polar opposite to freedom. Compliance is the goal. Any sort of coercive mechanism is to get you to comply in a sort of authoritarian, sort of coercive fashion. So I have this sort of scale here, and here's coercion. I hate this, but I can't say no. This is the key thing about lacking individuation, that sort of low-level consciousness of the manger, of the mass thinking. And it's the exact opposite of having an STD, saying, thinking, and doing. I don't want to do this. I don't like this. What I said the other day, becoming a no-sayer. So we're all experiencing this somewhere in our life. My story is obviously very poignant in the sense that I saw this spiritually, and that's the thread or the stone soup that I used to build my mission and my vision and my life around. But somewhere there's a coercion, there's something that stems from childhood that you will see in your workplace relationships. So this directly leads to perfection. So I told you that my competitive voice, I call her my perfect older sister. And I did have a perfect older sister on paper, so to speak. So that's where I I got that name from. But we can all identify that archetype of like the perfect older sister. I was watching a movie the other day on Netflix, and the mother had died, and there were two girls, and the older sister was 16, and she was the perfect older sister. She was the perfect soccer star and had the straight A's. And of course, she's 16, she starts dating. At one point, she yells at the dad. She's like, I cook for you, I clean for you, I take care of my sister. Like, I need a life, So this perfectionism, or this voice of doing everything perfectly, is directly linked to competitiveness. It's directly linked to being compared. Somewhere you were compared. Somewhere there was a competition and you didn't measure up, or you measured up so good that you collapsed. This is directly linked to anxiety rates in mental health. So I, many years ago, ran the nursing school, and nurses by default are known to be perfectionists. And, if you think about it, the doctor sends the orders, they have to make sure that they're doing it right. They have to check, the prescription, and that they're not doing medication errors. There's a lot of pressure in that job, not to mention the compassion and, the warmth and caring that you have to give. It's a very high stress job. And the nursing director at the time was a perfectionist. And I would tell her repeatedly, seek excellence, not perfection. Seek excellence, not perfection. And that's right here. Excellent. Here on the chart is perfect. It's off the scale. It doesn't exist. It automatically sets you up for failure. It's 0 to 100. It's total child script. So sometimes I will find myself having a thought, taking up my real estate, and I'll go through the TED Talk and I'll immediately identify its perfection, because that was one of the big things from my childhood in the coercive cult environment. So if you use that and you identify perfection, you know that there's competitiveness, you know that there's comparison, and it's a no-win. So it's exactly when you have to start having a rule book, or 48 to 52, to determine how you're going to strive for excellence, not perfection. It's directly linked to low self-worth, abandonment issues, and criticism. Anxiety is linked to perfectionism. People that are perfectionist are obsessive, inefficient at work. They have a multitude of serious mental health issues that affect attendance, performance, and morale. You'll often see a perfectionist procrastinate because she's afraid of failing even before she starts. Alternatively, she may position herself as a martyr, the only one who cares, thinks works enough about getting things right. Yet it's a vicious cycle. Nothing gets done, or I'm out sick because I'm so afraid to even start the project for fear of failure. So failure and perfection and excellence, these things are very important to identify in yourself and how they're triggered in a work environment. This is directly linked to fear of individuation. I forget his name, Stephen, someone said, zig when others zag. When you zig when others zag, you're going your own way. You're finding your own divine expression. Within the rules, you're still human, but you're finding that divinity. People that are perfectionists don't want to zig when others zag, so they're afraid of criticism, judgment, standing out, being different, being ridiculed. And so it's directly linked to not wanting to individuate. So individuation, you know, is a Jungian term. We've said it quite a bit. The Buddha used a term called bodhisattva, which is someone who's sort of gradually becoming the Buddha. So like this spiritual, you know, wise person, or understanding that everything is sacred space, using these environments to get self-realized. So they're basically the same term, one with a Buddhist context and one more in a depth psychology context, but they're about becoming whole. I shared with you on the board last week that circle with all the different eyes. That's a Gurdjieff concept, that we're all these multiple eyes. So we put on all these masks, we have all these roles, all these identities, and at the end of the day, we don't know who we are. That's why when Google says no one wants to wear a mask for work, it's about becoming whole in the workplace. It's about individuating in the workplace. Many years ago, I worked at the National Institutes of Health, and I was a nutritionist for this study. And this girl got hired, and her name was Doris. And my boss called me into the office one day, and she's like, Doris this, Doris that, Doris this, Doris that. And I looked at her and I said, do you want a Doris, two Dorises, or do you want a Doris and a Francis? And she looked at me and says, oh no, I want a Doris and a Francis. And I said, okay, we have the same job, but we're gonna do it differently. You have to individuate within the job description. You have to bring it your way. I remember years ago being in this religious school that my mom put me in, and there was a uniform. Well, I wanted to stand out, and I bought these shoes that were within uniform. I don't know if you guys remember Gumby, that little green guy that would stretch. Well, they had little Gumbies on, but they were red, yellow, and blue, which were the colors of the school uniform, so they technically matched. And that was a way that I individuated. There's actually been studies on people that wear uniforms to school or to work, that they'll wear like cool, funky socks with polka dots or different style shoes so that they can individuate. They can try to find their personality or their divinity, their spark within the rules. So it's like breaking the rules within the rules. That's sort of what we're trying to do here. We're all human, but let's not get sick or try to be perfect. Let's sort of find our own divine spark. Funny story about that school. I created like this honor society on campus, and I was leading the team of girls, and everybody was sitting on the floor, and we were all dressed in our uniform, but I had a red sweater. Again, I used the color of the uniforms, and I made it my own with my Gumby shoes and my red sweater. The next year I had left that school, I gone back to visit my friends, and the posters that they had used for the next school year campaign was of me leading that honor society with my Gumby shoes and my red sweater, because the photographer said that all the colors, all the pictures that they had taken of all the students were so dull, they were so boring, that I was the only one that stood out because of the added color that I had added to the uniform. And I wasn't even a student anymore, and yet these posters were plastered all over campus. So it's about finding your bodhisattva, your individuation process, your realization, your wholeness within the rules, within the confines of being human. And that really is the process that we help clients do. Rob Priest wrote a book called The Wisdom of Imperfection. Perfect doesn't exist. It's our imperfections. And you'll see in the 5 C's of the Diamond Leadership that that's one of the C's. So the wisdom of imperfection. And one of the things that I read about was this idea in Buddhism, or the way he writes it, path versus process. So I broke it down a little bit more. A path is person-centered. It's spirit-focused. It involves insights to self. When you're at work, you can do both. You can have a process-centered divinity, so to speak, or material focus. There's procedures, there's policies, there's a doctrine, there's a mission to the organization. Fine, you follow that process. That's part of your material growth that gets you, let's say, your paycheck or your raise at the end of the year. It's material, it's clear, concise, you need that. But within the work environment, finding a path, something that's personal, something that's individuated, something that's person-centered, something that's about, oh, using the law of correspondence, this is showing up in my sphere of consciousness so that I can grow or I can learn or integrate this. So I kind of took that idea of the path versus process that he talks about. That's some doctrines or some religions are very processed. There's a checklist, and others like Buddha are more about a path. But I say the workplace should be both. And do you want both to be at work? Do you just want to follow a process? Do you just want to be told what to do, go in, do your 8 hours, clock out, and that's it? It's very much linked to your parenting style from home, the parenting style at work. So perfectionists, and we all do have a perfect older sister voice somewhere in our competitive matrix of our head. I found this Eisenhower priority matrix. This is something that we use for people in leadership to designate what they're going to do in terms of their workload, because people will get caught up in the minutia and the small details and miss the bigger picture. So one of your roles as a leader is to help people sort of categorize, if you will, their work and the importance of their work. So Eisenhower stated that there's urgent and important work. That's obviously a priority. Urgent but not important. Not urgent but important, and not urgent and not important. Funny enough, oftentimes perfectionists will spend time on not urgent and not important work because they know how to do it. It's sort of process-oriented work. It's easy, there's steps, there's a checklist, it's routine, it's rote. And so other areas are left abandoned and they don't follow through on the bigger, more urgent, more important work in their life, spiritually or in their personal lives, emotionally, but of course in the workplace too. So there's certain things that you have to do first. There's things that you do later. There's things that you delegate. I told you the other day, not delegating is greedy. Not delegating is part of a self-worth issue because you think you have ultimate control. And we have control of nothing, only how we react to certain things. And there's certain things that you completely eliminate. And you choose that there's no time in your day in your schedule to do, and you might suffer a consequence, but you have to make those choices. And you have to do this same sort of context in your life. So some of the research says that if you do tend to have this perfectionism, and one of the things that you're trying to do is sort of break out of that, is to find something distracting, something menial to break the pattern of the constant thinking around perfectionism. Delegation, of course, super important. Does the extra time impact your life or your job for the better? It is known that perfectionists will spend so much time on something, making it quote unquote perfect, and it does not add anything to the presentation, anything to the outcome of the goal or the mission or the vision of the company, to the sales pitch, nothing. There is no really accountability on how that extra time impacts and makes something more successful or more money or whatever the metric is. There is a diminishing returns. You can work so much to the excellence that you come right back and it has no payoff whatsoever. This is this vicious cycle of this perfect older sister. You do need to have some standards. First and foremost, personal standards, of course, your values, and a checklist to sort of guide you. So I would call that the 48 to 52 checklist. When is a project or a PowerPoint or an assignment just right? When is it the 48 to 52 to your standards? So you don't go and waste valuable time and resources on perfection that doesn't exist. And there's something called psychological distance. Recapping at the end of the day or at the end of the week. Did I avoid something for fear of making mistakes? This is something that I give clients quite a bit as a self-reflective tool to see where they let this sort of perfectionism seep into their life. So as children and work being parental, there are unmet needs that show up at work. And these are 5 of some of the most common ways that unmet needs show up. You're jealous and insecure. You dissociate, so maybe you're recluse or you just let it go. You want nothing to do with it. You don't even respond perhaps to some communications. You're very clingy. You have fear of abandonment. Maybe you're in the boss's office all the time, or you're always trying to get, lunch dates with colleagues. You morph into whatever one wants you to be. So you don't have individuation. You don't have necessarily an identity. You'll just be anything for everybody. And you put people on pedestals, and you all know how I feel about dethroning things and people. So I told you the other day about the Enneagram. I'm just going to recap because we already covered it. But you want to identify your Enneagram number, which is linked to your inner child. So when I do my inner child slumber parties, this is one of the activities I do from childhood. And so now I've just translated it into work. If there is a number you see repeatedly, if there's a memory from childhood that you vividly remember and you know that you were 6 years old like me, you know that that age is when your inner child got stuck. So basically when your snow globe shatters between 0 to 7, and your parents look at you and basically say that is not acceptable, or they yell at you, like in the clip that I showed you of Disney's The Kid with Bruce Willis's character, you identify, whether you consciously or subconsciously remember the story, your inner child at that moment learned, I'm not enough, I'm abandoned, I need to be more, and perfectionism is one of the results of that. Of course, it's 0 to 100, where some people just dissociate completely, or they say, I'm never going to try again. That number is directly linked to a story from childhood. That age in childhood is directly linked to the number of the role that you have at work. So I said, go to the company in the year it started. If you're starting a startup, then the year you start is 2021, then it's 1. It's always going to be 1, just so you remember that. You subtract the year you started, and then you add a 1. That number is your inner child at work. So I told you guys, here in this particular job, I'm a 6-year-old. I'm at a number 6. I'm related to all these 6 themes, the symbols, all the things that I've showed you. But it's also related to my inner child at 6-year-old and what happened there. And I know exactly what happened there. So that indicates what I'm working on with my inner child with the situations that I create at work. So some Enneagram information that's available that's linked to parents is these are the numbers, and you may feel separated. Again, in a shadow aspect, you might be ambivalent if you're a 2, which is ironic because here you're a leader. You might be the firstborn, but the shadow is you feel separated. Here in this glyph of Mars has to do with ego and feeling separate, where this glyph of Venus has to do more with unmet needs of protection. So you're trying to seek to get closer. And number 3 has to do a lot with thoughts. So maybe you're the connector. Number 4 has to do with a crisis. So here you are trying, or you feel separated. So these are sort of some relationship to parents in terms of connectedness, separateness, or ambivalentness. Another thing I found related to the Enneagram that I link to childhood or to the shadow is here's the number of, let's say your inner child And it could be, again, perfectionist, obsessed, ruthless. These are the shadow aspects. They're not the personality styles. They're just the shadow aspects that can show up at work. So a 5 child that's supposed to be growth and fun in a shadow aspect in an ill fashion can show up withdrawn and disconnected. At an extremely sick level can be someone with psychotic breaks. So you can start seeing some of these childhood wounds, these childhood traumas linked to the roll number of your Enneagram, of your inner child trauma, linked to how you treat your parents. And again, work parents are parents, and how it can show up in a shadow aspect if it's not worked through or looked at. So there are 9 Enneagram points, so 9, so to speak, Enneagram numbers. And I'll just reiterate them here. But what I did was, what is it that your inner child wants? So for instance, I'm a number 6 in this particular job, wants some work, wants to build something. See her work displayed on the refrigerator, for instance. So I built the wellness center on campus. I wanted some acknowledgement or notification, sort of validation perhaps, or something noticeable that's clearly built. You see that I have all these posters and I have all this sort of displayed work, if you will, in my classroom. A lot of these classrooms are empty, but I like to have a lot of stuff displayed in the classroom. It makes me feel almost like I'm like in a science fair display or something. So depending on the number of your role at your particular job, so take the year the company started, the year you started, subtract that and add a 1 will give you your inner child number and your role at work. And here are things that that particular child at that workspace wants to do. So the shadow, I told you the other day that each Enneagram type or each role at work has a shadow aspect. Resentment, anger. So today I'm adding what you learn at work. Where's the individuation? Where's the bodhisattva? Where's this wholeness, this integrative capacity linked to your work number? If 1 is your number, then you learn serenity. If 2 is your number, you learn humility. If 3 is your number, you work on authenticity and truthfulness. If 4 is your number, you're looking at balance and equanimity. If 5 is your number, you're learning more detachment. If 6 is your number, you're learning courage. If 7 is your number, you learn sobriety. This does not technically mean not to drink. It means sobering up in the sense of maybe your emotional reactions or gluttony of taking on too much work and stepping back and owning just your 48 to 52. So it's not sobriety from an alcoholic perspective, although that could be totally too. Number 8, learning innocence. Again, this isn't innocence like you can go back into the snow globe, but maybe not being so like vigilant of what everyone's doing and who said what, like just sort of being with yourself and just more purity of thought. And number 9 is to learn action, taking action. So depending on your role in that particular job, you can learn through these lessons what you're there to learn at a spiritual or a sort of, spiritual path sort of way versus the process, which would be more materially related. So there's a lot of literature on forgiveness. And honestly, I am all about forgiveness of self. I don't think we're anybody to forgive another person. I don't even know if that's technically possible if you don't forgive yourself. So as I do with everything, I always bring it back to the self. It's all about ourselves. Why did we create this? That level of spiritual consciousness. And I allowed this to enter my sphere of consciousness so I can learn something from it. But there is a lot of research on forgiveness in the workplace. So in 2012, this company called Courageous Leadership worked with Google to build what they call a courageous culture. And one of the things they worked on was forgiveness. They said that that's directly linked to ongoing work relationships. If you want to read more about that, you can Google. There is a lot of information about sort of the things that they did. And I'm going to give you the REACH acronym in a minute, but I'm of course always going to bring it back to self because that really ultimately is what it's about. I bought a book many, many years ago that was called How to Forgive, How to Heal and Forgive or something. And seriously, it should have one line, self-forgiveness. This is all about self. If you don't forgive yourself for not being perfect, for being simply human, for being ordinary, for being chaotic, for having impure thoughts, that lower nature of ours that keeps the real estate in our head going constantly and trying to seek our unmet needs, we get nowhere with another person. The forgiveness of self then leads to, if we're even anyone to forgive another person, simply recognizing that the person, let's say in our workplace, that archetype entered our consciousness to mirror us. I'm divine despite my humanity. You're divine despite your humanity. And then we can meet at a heart space. But I am sharing the literature on forgiveness since it's important to the topic at hand. Things that they found were employees shared times when they failed to act at their values at work. I think this was a very key one. You can identify that you self-betray, that you will violate your non-negotiables at work. You will see that that is going to be a very difficult thing for you, but you have to have very clear values. So it's all, linked one to the other. They admit that they didn't understand something. That's courageous and brave. Speak up when they thought they had a better idea. So imagine telling your boss, oh, your idea is not that great, I have a better one. This was designed to remind everyone how easy it is to act outside of our values. This is important. Values, values, values. I cannot tell you our entire life is simply finding our value system, defining in measurable terms. We do not that. We can't forgive self, much less anybody else, because we don't even know what we're trying to forgive ourselves or what we're self-betraying from. So parenting style is directly linked to this. Attachment style, coercion, competition, comparing. This all is linked at a childhood subconscious 0 to 7 snow globe shattering, linked to the ability to self-forgive, which in turn will create a healthier environment at work and then possibly, forgiving another, so to speak. So Everett Worthington created this sort of REACH model, this acronym for forgiveness that's used in the workplace. Again, I bring it back to self. This is part of the bodhisattva. This is part of the wholeness. This is part of the individuation. He says R is to recall the hurt. So what is it that perhaps you self-betrayed, or the value system you didn't have, or an unmet need that you went and coercively sought out, let's say. Empathize your partner. I say your partner is your inner child. After 14 years old, you become the master of your own life. You're sort of handed the reins of your life, spiritually speaking. Legally, our parents have legal responsibility till 18. When your inner child is sort of crushed down between 0 and 7, that's the only child. So if you're a parent, I'm speaking here. If you're a parent, after 14, your children are responsible for their inner child, you're responsible for yours. And that's the one that we continue to violate by not having our values clearly established. That's the one we clearly self-betray. That's the partner that needs to be forgiven, or forgiven ourselves for not taking care of him or her. Altruistic gift of forgiveness, some sort of gesture, some sort of, like I wrote earlier, the numbers maybe, a play date or reading a story, something that's going to nurture your inner child. Again, I'm tying this back into self, some sort of gift to self. Commit to publicly to forgive. In this model, he says, write a letter of some sorts. Again, this is all about your inner work and your inner acknowledgement. You might write a letter, you might burn it, you might write something in your journal or not. It's personal, but a commitment to self that you're going to own that. And then to hold on to that. It's so easy in the next reprimand at work, in the next, meeting that you're late to, in the next email that you make a mistake, if you spell a wrong word, to go back all the way and again, not forgive, the perfect older sister voice show up. You beat yourself up. You're not enough. You feel, critical, and follow into that vicious cycle. So H is holding on to the hurt. To the forgiveness. So I shared this with you guys last week. This is one of the things that I do with people when we talk about work or leadership, or when they're trying to sort of take leadership, over their own life, so to speak. So I created these 12 values I told you around my definition of leadership, and I have them very clearly defined for myself, 0 to 100. I shared those with you. So this is sort of thoughts and questions around these criteria. You can make your own criteria. These are mine, but they seem to encompass a lot of key values that leaders possess or wish to possess. So the vision, here's the vision. How do you see yourself? What's your role in the organization? What are your expectations around this job? Dedication, again, your values. What do you buy into? What incongruences are there between your values and the organization's values? Do they overlap? Are they self-serving? Are they self-betraying? Do they violate your non-negotiables? And do you value yourself? And if you value yourself, then how are you going to show up with your time, your money, and your resources? Are you going to ask for the appropriate salary, or are you just going to, cower when that conversation comes up? Are you going to ask for raises? Are you going to leave when it's time to leave? Unless, of course, there's some, big visit that you need to prepare for. Are you going to honor your values? Adaptability has to be with thoughts. And you're going to use the workplace to allow others to mirror to you your impure thoughts and the way you think about yourself. Empathy. Are your needs met through this job? You have to meet your needs, your unmet needs. That's your responsibility. Is the job helping you to see your thoughts and meet your own needs? Number 5 is authenticity. Are you of value to your employer? Do you show up as yourself, balanced, or are you one of those people that kind of morphs with whatever they need, or you put people on a pedestal, or do you view yourself as authentic and show up balanced in life? Service. Are you a container for the mission and the vision of the organization? Again, you've got to check the mission and the vision. Does this align with your values? Do you like the mission and the vision? And do you contribute to that act? Honesty. Do you promote the values of the organization, or are you embarrassed? Do you lie? Do you sort of, cower at the idea of anyone knowing that you work there? Influence. Are you making a difference? Do you have a position of influence, not necessarily in the organization, but do you feel that you're an influential member, part of the team? And do you model the values of the organization in your personal life? Would the same person in your personal and your professional life be having the same value system? 9 is integrity. Again, your personal values and the organization in alignment, because that would be truth. Respect. Do you spread the mission? You have to believe in something to spread it. Resilience. Do you knock down negativity with clear communication? This does not mean put on a smile, everything's great, positive vibes only. That is not what I'm about at all. It's like, do we clear the air? Do we talk about the Mokitas in the room, the elephant in the room, through clear communication? And lastly, super, super important, are you in union with the organization? Does this spiritually serve you? And does it serve the community? I told you that astrologically, we bring ourselves in individually. In our work life over here in this personal sector, we work through spirituality to our sort of material and spiritual, and then we go out into the community and become social beings, influential people, vocation, give back to society. But if the employer is not serving you and a whole person, then how are you going to give back to the community when you're still sort of down here getting basic needs met because you're in a fear-based culture? So these are some of the tools that I use. So I matched up an astrology wheel with the values, because obviously this is my my organizational thought process. And I'm going to talk to you about the Ascendant. If you know your time, this is a really cool tool. I use this a lot with clients, but you need to know your time of birth. If you know your time of birth, you can get it free, a chart online. The Ascendant is this arrow right here. It's linked directly to the vision. Okay, so this is your vision, company's vision. This sign, in mine is Sagittarius, is fire. The sign that we're looking at is the one before. So if you have fire, the one previously is Scorpio, is water. This is what I'm going to talk about in a minute in terms of mental structure, psychological structure, and how we show up as a shadow and why we get sick or why we work. So I'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to preface that. Marco Greenberg, he created 11 archetypes. You know that I work with the 12 archetypes, the 12 planets, the ones in our classroom, the ones with the Olympians and the disciples. So you'll see that in my model. But I thought this was a cute little way to break them down too. And you can see which one you are, so to speak, at work. Or if there's any that bother you, those are some you need to integrate competitive voices. He says that there's 11 work archetypes. The merchant is transactional, human interaction and promotion. This is their job. So one of the things that he said in his article was about, if you would have told Ruth Bader Ginsburg that she was a merchant archetype, she would have been upset. But basically that's what she did. She was all about human interaction. She was all about social justice, better improvements for women and minorities and LGBTQ. So she was absolutely promoting the ideas of the minorities. So she was considered, in his view, a merchant archetype. The priest archetype is someone who likes to connect very deeply with others in the organization. There's a depth to this type of person. A scribe is someone who tells stories. Maybe they come home from their weekend around the water cooler and they're telling the story, or they're sharing the latest Netflix movie, or they gossip about people in the office. The sentry is the person who keeps everything steady and safe. They're sort of like the gatekeeper, maybe the HR person. Nope, you got to see, I can't say that. Nope, you want a field trip, you have to fill out this form. They're sort of like that policies and procedures manual that keeps everything running safe and steady. The shepherd tends to be a loner. Maybe they're ahead of the curve. Maybe they're original thinkers, and they tend to be followed because they're sort of early adopters or they're innovators. The Sherpa are the assistants, the helpers, what you might think is the simple task, the guy that changes the light bulb or the one that takes out the garbage. These assistants or these Sherpas are extremely important in the workplace to sort of keep things running, things that you may not think of. The Troubadour is the entertainer, the comedian. Maybe they're the one, every time we start a faculty staff meeting, the president says, who has a joke? And there's one person that always has a joke. So that person would be like the Troubadour. The welder is about connections, connecting parts and people, maybe identifying there's a project over here. This person from this department would be the best person to help complement that team. The cobbler is all about the detail, the meticulousness and the details. If you're a global thinker like me, you don't pay attention to the details. You need somebody that's thinking about the exact timing, the exact pricing, the exact, sort of detail orientedness of the job as well. The healer might be the person that holds space, listens patiently. Maybe they're the one that rules customer service. We have a director of first impressions in our job. That's sort of like the person that greets you and asks you how your day was. And then the Baron might be the CEO or the manager. A supervisor sort of runs the show, is constantly sort of pulling all of these, people and aspects and jobs together. So those are Marco Greenberg's. I'm going to talk about the Olympians in a minute, and then I'll tie it into that element for your chart. So the Olympian archetypes lead you to live a story out at work. This is directly linked to your role of your family, the parenting style, the unmet need, your Enneagram inner child number, the shadow aspects. These are all related. This is all symbolic sort of living. So you've got Aphrodite. She's like the beauty queen, and the one that's all into the, makeup and image. Hephaestus might be the outsider. He might be wounded. He might be passive aggressive, makes snarky comments at meetings below his breath. Aries creates conflict, is aggressive, maybe bold, maybe very passionate about projects. Athena strategizes, she organizes. She's an overachiever, typical perfectionist archetype. Artemis is a hard worker, but she's kind of minds her own business, maybe on the quiet side. Apollo tends to be the star employee, the one that's always like employee of the month type of thing. Hermes is the jokester, the buffoon, Maybe he's in sales. Maybe he lies, white lies to kind of bend the rules. Zeus has to be the one with the positive outlook, maybe good looking, good luck, the womanizer, the smooth talker on campus. Neptune is very sensitive, emotional. Maybe there's a martyr or savior archetype there. That can also be perfectionist. Pluto might be the dark humor, secretive, sits alone in his cubby, just, kind of looking at all from the corner. Hera is always nagging, also perfectionist, checking up on everyone, maybe, sort of mixing into people's business. And Hestia tends to be the office caretaker. Maybe she bakes. So these are archetypes that occur at work. And these are just a few words. But if there's someone in your workplace that you're reading on this list, either mine or Greenberg's list, that sort of strike a chord that irk you when you think of that person, oh, that's Sally at the front desk. There's something there archetypally that you need to work through. And you can put that through the triad and see why that person's sort of personality, is something you judge because it's linked to something you need to integrate. So going back, so let me just kind of take you here. This is the ascendant, and this is what I call the vision. So it's the beginning of the leadership circle, just like this is the vision. This is linked directly in astrology to raising your consciousness. Your vision is that global view you have of your life. I want to eliminate spiritual coercion or spiritual abuse. This is a very larger than life sort of vision for my life. It's going to be ruled by my ascendant. That is the sign of consciousness raising. You cannot raise your consciousness if you do not understand the element. Forget about the sign. This is not about astrology. This is about element, air, earth, fire, water. So if you know your ascendant is fire like mine, the element prior is Scorpio, which is water. And if you don't know, you can Google. There's only the 4 elements. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. People that have a fire ascendant, a fire prior to the ascendant, they need earth. These people suffer from cowardice and fear. They need to contain their fire. So the ascendant is earth. The sign earlier is fire. So if you have an earth ascendant, this would be you. And one of the root causes of your psychosis or your neurosis is you're afraid. This has to do directly with fire, with the narcissism, with feeling larger than life, as many people do. They don't know how to contain the fire. So what they do is they need earth. And since earth is the densest element and earth is the body, you will oftentimes see people with that earth ascendant and get sick, specifically Virgo ascendants. Earth needs air. So if your earth is the element before your air ascendant, doesn't matter what sign, if it's Aquarius, Libra, or Gemini, you suffer from analysis and avarice. We talked about this on Tuesday. There's sort of like a hoarding or wanting more, because earth psychology is hoarding. Earth psychology is, I need security and safety. And so they suffer from over-analysis. What they need is air, which is openness. So what tends to happen is if the element prior to your ascendant, in this case, fire has no container, you need a container. You're probably not going to like people, those archetypes that force you into the rules, that force you into the details, that force you into the meticulousness, or the HR person that says, nope, this is the rules and the structure that you have to follow. That's why you're going to have a clash with that archetype person linked directly to the element. If earth is your prior element to your ascendant, you're going to overanalyze and hoard and greed and safe, secure, and have boundaries. You're going to be irked by the person that's open and curious and free and new ideas because you want structure and safety. You're probably going to have that meticulous job with the checklist. People that have air before the ascendant and the ascendant is water are going to suffer from vanity and deceit. Air is, I can do everything. Think of the psychology of air. It's all over. There's nothing that can keep me from this. So there's a tendency to lie. There's a tendency to deceit. No one can capture me. I'm sneaky. It's a psychology of the personality. They need emotion. I actually had a client yesterday with this. And I said to her, I said, you're such an air psychology. You're such an air construct. Your subconscious is air. No one can grab me. Nobody can fit me into a box, that you have to create emotional pain, because that's the shadow side of this, in order to feel that you are actually a human being. And she has an autistic child, and she's had a lot of like ups and downs emotionally in her life, a lot of violence, a lot of drama emotionally. And I said, you created the emotion, which is the water, because the air element psychology doesn't let you be contained. You need something, and air needs water. Water, so if your element is water prior to the ascendant fire like I have, you're going to suffer from melancholy and envy. In Hinduism, the ripus, or the deadly sins, there's jala is the element of water, and envy is described as jala. Jala is water. It just keeps going and going and going. The amount of envy, the amount of sadness in the water needs fire to burn up some of that, water that just takes up the entire world, which is courage and bravery. So if you have someone at work, let's say, that's courageous, that's brave, that stands up, that's a leader, you might be like, oh, I don't like that, or judge it because it's what you need. So this is a very, very important psychological construct. The way to know, you do need the birth time for this. I just want to reiterate, because I want you guys to understand this psychology is, whatever this ascendant is, which is linked to the vision in my leadership, this is how I work with people. I take them to the element prior. This element prior, in my case, water, is the one that's my shadow. And I need to take in the fire element so I can feel human. So I create fire temperaments or fire situations, burn through people, like that teacher of mine in high school that basically said, no, I'm the authority here. I tried being courageous at the wrong time, like fire tone, to feel in my body, to have a vision. That's why I said that assignment of the stone soup. You put all your words and all your threads, you're gonna see your mission. You're gonna see your vision here, but it's directly linked to a psychology that people have when they suffer from the psychological archetype, or the psychological, framework, mental framework. They need to sort of force themselves into the body using the other element. So I'm almost done. I want to talk about my 5 C's of becoming a diamond. Obviously, this is about your third chakra, your purification, your self-worth, your individuation, but of course, it can be extrapolated to self and leadership and work. So in diamond culture, if you've ever gone diamond shopping, there's the 4 C's: cut, color, clarity, carrot, and I add consciousness, since that's what all of mental and spiritual health is all about. So cut is the most important influence on the sparkle of the diamond, therefore you. What do you want to look like after the process of this job, of taking this job? When you take on the job, what is it that you want to look like afterwards? What are you going to purify? What are you going to sort of carve away? Michelangelo said that making the David was super easy. He just chipped away at the excess, and that the David was already in the slab of marble. What are you going to be chipping away at during this job that's going to make you look like after the process? This is very much linked to your divine will and your purpose. You have to know your values to get there. This will also identify your low-level consciousness. Why are you working in a place, and what is it that you're going to work through? Let's say it's a fear culture. Maybe you're working on coercion, or you're working on comparison. And after this job ends, week, 2 weeks, 3 years, 30 years, doesn't matter. How will you improve as a result of this job? Next is color. The less color, according to diamonds, are better. This is linked to the spiritual striptease. The less veils you wear, the better. What Google sort of established. You don't have a mask that you wear at work and one that at home, but you show up whole, individuated, good, bad, and ugly at work. Less personality and more soul. I told you that personality are sort of like the mask that we wear to sort of morph in, whereas soul is the individuation process where you show up warts and all. This is going to require constant TED Talks. What are you thinking? What are your emotions? What are your desires according to this? What are you judging, so that you can get clearer and clearer and clearer in your color? And how can the job help you be more authentic? Perhaps what can you learn from those archetypes that you dislike, or the elements that you dislike? Next is clarity. Clarity and diamond speak are tiny imperfections, and they're not that important to the sort of price or the quality at the end of the day. So it's really about understanding, appreciating, and forgiving your imperfections, that divinity through the humanity. How is it that you can do it? What red sweater, what Gumby shoes, what zig when others are zagging can you bring to the job, to the role, and to the organization? And how do those quirks and differences benefit the organization? How can you be, in my case, a Francis and not a Doris, so that everybody can get both? Next is carat. Carat is directly linked to the weight of the diamond. You have weight. Weight is linked to self-worth, your time, your money, your resources, your presence there. Only you can do it that way. When you're there or you're not there, people miss you. Your organization, your team misses you. You're needed. The other day I went to the Van Gogh and someone came in and said, "Where were you? We missed you all day." Like, I wasn't around. Whatever presence that I brought was missing. It's directly linked to your self-worth. Are you honoring your time, money, and resources? Are you overworking for needs of validation, of morphing in, not knowing how to say no, of coercion? You have to look at those things. And are you overdoing the workload? That's an unmet need and unhealthy. And the last C, which is personally the most important to me, is consciousness. Raising consciousness is all that this is about. Are you using the job to grow spiritually? Are you looking at the parallels from your snow globe, from your unmet needs, from the parenting style, from coercion, from comparison, from your wound, from childhood, and seeing how this job can really help you work through those things that you couldn't do with your parents as a child? And what archetypes are you incorporating? When you have that list of archetypes, in any way that you look at them, if you start adding those archetypes in or integrating, you're growing spiritually and raising consciousness, because after awareness comes integration. Then you could do it differently. So I just want to wrap up with Carl Jung. And Carl Jung wrote a book called Answer to Job. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Job story, but Job in the Bible was a man who endured a lot of pain and suffering. And Carl Jung wrote basically like an answer to Job in response to that Bible story. And he said, whoever knows God has an effect on him. It seems a little maybe narcissistic, maybe it seems a little hubris and prideful to think that you matter enough, you matter in any capacity that God would care. But Jung said that you did. And the reality is that our human consciousness affects creation. We are creators in this universe. It goes back to that cause and effect. And we create the world we live in. It's all happening in our heads. So everything we're creating at the level of poverty or social injustice or workplace fear, we're participating in that. And we do matter at a consciousness level to the universe. We impact absolutely everything and everyone. What we are matters monumentally. If we go to work, if we continue the process of our child's script, if we're just process oriented rather than path oriented, and we separate from the divine, from our divine self, from our spiritual nature, from using work as a sacred space, using work as dharma, using work to define our values, our mission, our vision for our personal leadership, our personal lives, then we kind of separate from the role that we actually came to play at a larger scale. Individuation helps to enrich the storehouse consciousness. Storehouse consciousness is a term that Buddha said for the collective unconscious. Jung calls it the collective unconscious. We are all working symbolically and archetypally, stored in our subconscious that's connected to everything else. That's why when we see a color or a symbol, or why we study so much symbol and myth, this is all stored in Jung's collective unconscious or in Buddha's storehouse consciousness. When we individuate, we enrich that. We give another version to that story, to that symbol, to the way that it can be done humanly and divinely. Jung visited with the Navajo Indians, and they told him that as a tribe, they participated in helping their sun god cross the sky each day. And basically, what that meant was you are indispensable for the completion of creation. You are needed in your family, you're needed in your workplace, but you're needed in the world. Your individuation process adds to this and what this all becomes, whether you're speaking at the family level, at the individual level, at the work level, or at the universal level. And it's only through raising your consciousness via individuation, becoming that bodhisattva, healing that perfectionism, becoming excellent rather than trying to be perfect, and creating trust in self, forgiving self, that you can weave your story, your individuated high consciousness story into the fabric of the world and rewrite the story, add to the body of literature, so to speak, of all souls that have been here. Any questions? I'm going to stop the recording and take attendance.